Hello there! Welcome to the instructional video of our lunar phase lesson. To catch you up with our class, this video will teach you everything you need to know moving forward into our gravity lesson. In your science journal, I would like you to write 2 to 3 sentences about a time you saw the moon and what your observations were. Think about what the moon looked like. What was the shape? Was it a certain color? Did you see it during the day or night? Take a minute to write, and if you need more time, press pause on the video. Next, underneath your observational sentences in your scientific journal, I would like you to hypothesize what you think a lunar phase may be. In addition, hypothesize how long you think it takes for the moon to orbit the Earth. At the end of this lesson, we will revisit your hypothesis to see if you were correct. Don't forget, if you need more time, feel free to press pause to finish up your hypothesis before we continue with the lesson. The moon itself doesn't emit any light like the sun. What we see when we see the moon is sunlight being reflected off of the moon. The phases of the moon is how much of the moon appears to us on Earth that is lit up by the sun. As the moon orbits the Earth for a total of 1 month, we see the phases of the moon that are being lit up by the sun. These are called lunar phases. The first lunar phase is called the new moon. This is where we can't see any of the lit up side of the moon. The moon is between us and the sun. As the moon orbits the Earth, we will see more and more of the lit up side until finally the moon is on the opposite side of the Earth from the sun and we get a full moon. From Earth, we only see the non-lit up side. You can think of the new moon as a dark moon. The second phase is called a crescent moon. The sunlit portion of the moon that is visible from Earth appears to either be increasing, waxes, or decreasing, wanes, as the moon orbits the Earth. A crescent moon can either be a waxing or waning, meaning less than half of the sunlight portion of the moon is visible from Earth. The third phase is called the first quarter moon. It is simply when half of the sunlight portion of the moon is visible to us from Earth. You may also know this as a half moon. The fourth phase is a waxing gibbous moon. Remember that the sunlight portion of the moon that is visible from Earth appears to either increase, waxes, or decreases, wanes, as the moon orbits the Earth. In this case, the amount of sunlight that appears has increased, so it's a waxing gibbous moon. More than half of the sunlight portion of the moon is visible to us from Earth. The fifth phase is called a full moon. This occurs when the sunlight portion of the moon is facing the Earth and the Earth is positioned between the sun and the moon. This is when you can see the moon fully visible in the sky. The sixth phase is called a waning gibbous moon. Recall that the sunlight decreases. It is called wanes. A waning gibbous moon means less than half of the sunlight portion of the moon is visible from Earth. The seventh phase is called a last quarter moon. It is when on Earth we can see half of the sunlight portion of the moon. It is in the last quarter of its lunar cycle, hence the name last quarter moon. The eighth phase is a waning crescent moon. Remember that since the amount of sunlight seen from Earth has decreased, it's a waning moon. It is a crescent moon because less than half of the sunlight portion of the moon is visible from Earth. Putting these two conditions together gives us the lunar phase of a waning crescent moon, the eighth phase. The ninth phase is back to a new moon, and the moon has completed its 1 month orbit around Earth. It'll then begin again throughout its 9 lunar phases for another month. Let's pause and assess. Try answering the following questions. 1. When does a new moon occur? 2. How can you tell it is a crescent moon? 3. How long is the moon's orbit around Earth? Write your answers in your scientific notebook and then later the answer given next to it. Check your answer to see if you got it correct. If not, that's okay, we'll continue to practice. This is a great time to self-check for understanding. Next is your hands-on activity. You will be recreating the lunar phases with your given supplies. Once you have completed this activity, take a picture of it and upload it as an attachment. You can refer to this slide to recreate the phases or follow along with me in the next video as we recreate the phases of the moon together. Hello class, and welcome to your hands-on activity. Today we'll be using Oreos to identify the phases of the moon. So go ahead and get your supplies out. You'll need your Oreos, you'll need your colored pencil, and you'll also need your spoon. And our first step before we even forget is to draw the sun on our paper. As some of you know, I'm not the best artist. Some of you have seen some of my funny drawings, but I'll do my best. Go ahead and definitely you want to put where your sun rays are. I'm going to add orange so you can better see on the camera. This is not a necessary step for you. If you have orange and you want to, feel free to be creative with colors. But again, this is not a necessary step. I just want you to be able to see my sun on the camera. With your writing utensil, your second step is to identify where Earth is. And it should be in the center of your paper. And go ahead and identify it by writing the name Earth, or if you want, you can color it in with the continents, whatever you would like. Okay, go ahead and grab your Oreos and begin to separate them. The best way to separate them is to hold them in your palm and twist, 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 and you should be able to separate them. We will be using the Oreo as the moon. This will be representative of a new moon, and this side with the frosting is going to be the parts of the moon that is illuminated by the sun. So this would be a full moon. But let's begin by identifying our first phase, which is our new moon. Our new moon is always between the Earth and the sun, and it is the first cycle in our lunar phase. Our second phase is a waxing crescent moon. Now, what does waxing mean? That means there's an increase in illuminating sun on the moon. So crescent is less than half. So we're going to scrape off the remaining and leave less than half. Feel free to eat the icing. I don't care for icing, so I'm not going to eat it, but I will eat the cookie. And then just scrape, scrape, scrape. And you should be left with a waxing crescent. Don't forget that you must identify your phase. It says a waxing crescent. And our third phase is a first quarter moon. It's the first quarter moon in the lunar cycle. That's why it's first. And what does quarter mean? Quarter means that there is half of the moon being illuminated. So right down the middle, and you'll scrape off the remaining half. So you should be left with a first quarter moon. Half of the moon's being illuminated by the sun. Go ahead and identify that as your first quarter. On to the fourth phase, and the fourth phase is called a waxing gibbous. Again, what does waxing mean? That means there's an increase in sun being illuminated onto the moon. And a gibbous moon is when there's more than half of the moon is illuminated by the sun. So we're going to scrape off more than half of the icing. You should be left with a waxing gibbous moon. Don't forget that you'll need to identify it. All right, great job so far. Our fifth cycle is the easiest one. It's a full moon. All of the moons being illuminated by the sun. Easy, we don't have to scrape anything off. But don't forget, we need to identify it as a full moon. And what's the sixth phase in our lunar cycle? Well, thinking back, we're just going backwards now. It's a waning gibbous. What does waning mean? Waning means there's a decrease in sunlight being illuminated onto the moon. If there is a decrease and it's a gibbous, gibbous meaning more than half, then we're going to take off sunlight now because we're decreasing. Scrape, 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 less than half off, and you should be left with a waning gibbous. Waning gibbous moon. Our seventh step is a last quarter moon. Just like our first quarter, it's going to be half is being illuminated, but it's in the last parts of our lunar cycle. So it's our last quarter. Less than half. Very good. Our eighth lunar cycle is our waning crescent. Our waning crescent means we're decreasing the amount of icing, but it is still crescent, meaning there's less than half being illuminated. So scrape off that, and you should be left with a waning crescent moon. And then, of course, our ninth phase, or also the end and beginning of our lunar cycle in the monthly orbit, is the dark moon. So it's just going to be that same Oreo. All right, guys, great job. At the end of your hands-on activity, all of your lunar cycles should be in the correct orbit, 1 through 9, and I hope you enjoy.